How many of us have heard the term lately, trust the science? In the carnivore space, show me a study. Well, in part 2 with Eddie Goeke, Mark and I talked to him, and his take on what science is should be in everybody's wheelhouse. If we all took the approach that Eddie has about the science, what science actually is, and opinions and truth, we get into all of it. So hopefully you enjoyed part 1 with Eddie telling his story. In part 2, we get into a bit more conversation about what actually is science. And for the record, I was waiting for his book, so I couldn't wait. He's coming on the podcast on Sunday to co-host. So I got the audio book, Contraindicated, and it's definitely in one of my reference books. It's unbelievable. So I'm about a third of the way in. I'll have it finished by Sunday, but it's one of those books that lays it all on the table. So all the questions we have, and on my channel, Food for Thought, Question Everything, Eddie reinforces that we should be questioning everything. Where is the information coming from? Who is it coming from? Is it an opinion? And I hope you really enjoy part 2 of this with Eddie Goeke, because I sure did, and we can't wait to see him on Sunday. So enjoy part 2 with Eddie Goeke.
What I find hilarious is I was the same way with Paul Saladino. I mean, I actually heard, the first time I heard Bart K was on Paul's Fundamental Health podcast when Paul was still full carnivore.
Yeah.
And then when he started going off the fruit and honey stuff, and I became a really big fan of Bart K. And my point is, Eddie, you're a perfect example of the information or the thing that's being said, not the person who's saying it. We all have characters, and we all have, whether you have a social media presence, but you're a perfect example of that, because I think I saw you first on with Dr. Abs, I think was the first time I saw you. And I was like, that is what Bart K taught me that, like, think about what's being said, not who's saying it, I am, and when you were with Dr. Abs, you guys had such a great discussion. I think you were actually critiquing something, and that's what turned me on to you. And man, your brain and what you say is I think everybody would be better off listening to you, because you come from that objective logic, and it's all the good things that, we need to hear. Cause like especially in this space, there's a lot of opinions, but we don't know who's what and who's who. And, we're all Stephen Gundry fans until we're not, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah, I thought I knew everything whenever I was listening to Dr. Gundry, because he was all scientific. Here's a science paper that says this, and science. Oh, as soon as someone says science, we associate it with like the arbiter, or not really the arbiter, but the be all end all when it comes to truth. And in reality, whenever there's an argument, there's a philosophical argument behind science. Like, is science itself actually not the thing that you should be using to purvey truth, or is it, and we're just using it improperly? We're employing the methods improperly. But there's this idea that whenever you frame it like that, you almost frame it as if those two things are mutually exclusive. Mm-hmm. Well, they're really not. I think that science says can actually, even in the ideals of what science can prove, it can prove a lot less than people think it can, and also people are employing it improperly. Like, they're both happening at the same time. And I think it's the biggest maturity in my understanding of health and science, health science as well, was understanding that science, you're going to sound anti-scientific when you insist upon the scientific method, because when you fully understand it, you realize that, oh, it can only prove this amount, not this amount. All of this other stuff that it purports to be able to prove is a bunch of opinions by authors that conducted the study.
Exactly, yeah.
So it's like, that's why I think it's incredibly important that people understand the fundamentals of science, and even stuff that seems sort of irrelevant. You have to sort of understand a basic level, a fundamental level of physics to understand calories and their implication in diet, for example. You have to understand a fundamental level of like how muscle fibers work, for example, when you start talking about what may or may not benefit, exercise, and what's ergogenic or not, stuff like that. And that's why I prioritize the fundamentals. And you can't, a perfect analogy of this is if you take flowers out of the ground and you cut the stems and you put them in a vase, well, you don't have the foundation. They're going to die. They don't last on their own. So we're trying to entertain all this stuff up here without understanding, oh, well, you're getting all the foundation wrong, which warps and distorts the conclusions that you arrive at completely.
Yeah.
And so that's the biggest, I think it's the most endemic phenomenon in the space, is people not understanding the fundamentals. Like, people need to understand, like, take a course or something that understand, like, the fundamentals of statistics. That's a big one in the space, because that's all human nutrition science really is. You look at the methods and the way that the study was put together. Sure, that's one thing. But then when you look at the results, the numbers there are talking about stats. And people believe that, randomized controlled trials can assert causality, for example, and all this other stuff. And it's just, when you learn the foundations, you can almost you can take on like 99% of health influencers online, because they don't get it.
Yeah.
So that's the thing I saw with Paul Saladino a lot. I still do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. You can make anything sound like anything, if you got the right money behind you and the right, associations.
Bullshit sells, doesn't it?
Yeah. And that's the one thing that I find is amazing with you is that you really get the mechanisms, you get the deeper things. And, when we're on this channel, especially saying, everybody talks about it, trust the science. Well, that's a great way to start. But it's just understanding that science is flawed. That is just the start. Like, for people coming into this and going, whoa, I don't know what to believe. Just understand that there is business. There is, opinions.
But not only that, why are we not allowed to question the science?
Well,
that's what I don't get.
Yeah, there's a few things, right? There's a few threads, a few things I want to say there, because one of the things, they say trust the science. But really, I would respond to that and say, well, define the science. What do you mean by the science? Like, you're conflating the science with facts. If you replace the science in that sentence with facts, you believe those to be synonymous. Trust the facts. When in reality, yeah, trust the facts, sure. Okay, but is the science always factual, or is it opinionated? Or does it involve scientists inferring things, therefore making opinions about the inferences they saw or made in the study, like the actual results of the study?
Yeah.
Like, people don't understand that. This is also not to mention that the science that's actually available to the public, that's filtered by scientific journals. So I think that there are a lot of irresponsible scientists, and they're all over the internet. But I think the biggest problem actually isn't with respect to scientists. It's with respect to the scientific journals, because in order to be a successful scientist, you have to get your work published. And so they always have to play the game. The scientific journals are the ones that are telling them, you have to do this. Oh, we reject this because you said this, you said that. So they're almost in a lose-lose situation. If you actually want to purvey the truth and get the truth out there to the public as a scientist, you have to be a scientist. You have to get your work out there. But in order to get your work out there, you almost have to give the wrong information. You have to give the wrong information first. You
got to play politics.
Exactly. It's politics. And so I think that there are certain scientists that catch flack that isn't deserved, because they're in a really bad situation. The scientific journals are the major problem. The British Medical Journal released this study that shows this. Yeah, okay, this conduction of this study, how many others were conducted the same way that showed differing results? That's a big issue, huge issue. And so they're the main ideology force there. And I think a great way, I mean, the idea that science itself, to go back to this other notion, that science itself is like the one thing, that the be all end all when it comes to establishing truth and discovering it. This has been debated by philosophers for a long time, actually. There was, again, going back to the whole things that sound irrelevant on the surface are actually not irrelevant at all. For centuries, people were trying to figure out, well, how do we discover the underlying logic of the universe best? There were two sides. Think of it as like red and blue. It was revelation versus material investigation of the universe. That is like, civilizations were formed. Our civilization, the Western civilization, was formed on the coexistence of both of them, actually. But there were wars fought about this ideology. And the Greeks were the sort of pioneers of the whole, okay, let's discover the universe by using our reason and using material investigation. They were sort of the catalyst for science as we know it to be today. And then Jerusalem was the founding ideology behind revelation. And the idea was that they're mutually exclusive and, but the reason I bring this up is because the revelation arguments were, well, science itself, like you really think you can discover the underlying logic of the universe with a mere human mind? That was like one of the arguments that was given. And the materialists were saying, well, we have a responsibility to do so if we are a member of the human race on this planet. So it was like this dichotomy between the two. But the irony is that I'm not saying that one is exclusively true or the other is. They're both true in their own ways. But the revelation side argument that says, well, you're not going to get anywhere, at least to the way that you think you are, they're kind of right. Because if you actually follow science to its strict demands, you can't, causality itself as a concept, especially in inferential statistics or statistics at all, is a construct. It's an ideal that you can't actually attain. You try and purvey it as much as possible, and you have a responsibility to, but you can't actually get to it. And people don't understand, they genuinely don't understand this. All we see today is a bunch of people with unbridled arrogance, whether they realize it or not, whether they're conscious of it or not, trying to assert order in a chaotic universe, even at the expense of responsibility, meaning that even when it's not responsible to do so, they will do it because humans don't like chaos. And that makes sense. But if you establish order where it's not appropriate to be established, that's extremely dangerous. The most abstract version of that is asserting causality with associations. If you assert that even something that we may believe, like, okay, all of these industrial the preservatives in food, okay, they're cancer causing. Now, I believe that they're contributing to cancer development. However, you have to be careful with saying that science says that it causes it, because if you were to say that about things like red meat, oh, this thing causes cancer, well, you kind of give the government, for example, a reason to ban it. Maybe you have to be extremely careful. You have to be extremely careful with saying that it's your opinion versus that it's actually an established fact, like matter exists or something. Like, okay, well, yeah, like this table in front of me exists. That's a fact, but red meat causes cancer because epidemiology said so. Well, no, you can't say that. So yeah, that's what. Ironically, my channel focuses primarily on that concept, like just not me spreading awareness of the fact that you cannot be convicting about these claims at all. You have to be ambiguous. That might be your opinion, but don't say it as fact. More than it has really anything to do with health. It's really ironic. Like, that's the main purpose of the channel, is being like, say that about anything. Say that about anything else, and I would say the same thing. Like, no, may or may not.
Yeah,
And,
no doubt.
Yeah.
When I like to think of it like people cause and effect. It's a natural law, hermetic principle, all that stuff. Throw a pebble in the pond and the ripples go. Now throw 9,851 pebbles in the pond and tell me what caused what, right? Which ripples what?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's people, and that's a problem in science as well, especially in the cellular biology sector, where they'll analyze a mechanism and think of a mechanism that they're analyzing as like a gear, which is literally, I think of it the exact same way as Bart, for example, says in his videos. He calls them cogs, I call them gears. But it's like looking at one gear, studying that gear and how it works, and saying, okay, well, given that this gear exists, if you introduce this into the entire system at large, you're going to be causing issues. Not understanding that the gear is working in tandem with thousands of other gears, and you have no idea how it'll actually affect it at all, like whatsoever. You have no idea where it's going to go, like what's going to happen to that thing. And a lot of people this is a practical example of this. A pragmatic one is the mTOR conversation. And I think David Sinclair was one of the first people. Peter Attia was talking about this at one point as well. But David Sinclair was the first person I heard talk about mTOR. Like, it's a growth factor. And well, mTOR, it seems to be, since it's associated with cellular proliferation, it could expedite the aging process. Well, what things stimulate? First of all, just stop right there, and you're like, well, you have no idea of that. That is your hypothesis. mTOR is important for muscle growth, for example.
Is it necessary? Yes.
Yes, there it is. Exactly. But also, then he goes even further and says, well, what stimulates this upregulated mTOR activation? And then he wants to say a bunch of animal protein. And it's like, well,
SIRT1 activation by red meat, but don't eat red meat because it'll kill you fast and cause cancer.
Yeah. And I'm like, wait, okay, so how? And IGF-1 was a big one that he talked about too.
Yeah.
And that's a hilarious one. It's like, well, IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor 1. Okay, so it works in tandem with insulin. You can't have an increase in IGF-1 without an increase in insulin, and you're going to blame it on protein. Well, protein does raise insulin, but it massively increases insulin only whenever it's associated with carb consumption. So there we go. So he went bad twice during that line of logic. But people believe it's like, okay, so you basically started with reductionism and then asserted your opinion as fact at the end by basing your conclusions on epidemiology and maybe one RCT with a sample size of like 12 people. It's like, what was that? But people think that's science. They don't understand. Like, again, those two problems with science are not mutually exclusive. They're both happening at the same time. It's being done improperly, and people think that even when it is done properly, it can tell a lot more about the universe than it actually can. Like both of those, David just did exactly that.
Yeah.
In that logic.
Well, I was wrapped up in David Sinclair, read his book, like heard everything. I was like, wow, this isn't. But wait a minute, come on.
Yeah,
We need these things, and you're telling us that you don't eat them because they're bad. Too much of it is bad.
And then
just doesn't add up.
Yeah. I mean, the most fundamental, once you realize that about science, all these edifices, all these ideological positions that are sort of constructed, like, for example, you have a vegan ideology, there's a space there, there's a carnivore space there, there's an animal-based, quote unquote, at least, space there. And once you realize that the foundation that they're all based on is completely, at least misinterpreted, they all fall apart, and then you're left with nothing. It's actually the sole purpose of my book was about this. The first part of it was tearing everything down, exposing everything, and then the foundations fall. But then that's like what you're left with is a person standing around. If you want to picture it, a bunch of broken down buildings, like that are just piles of dust around them. They're like, well, I need something. So where do I go now? And the whole thing was building one that was actually responsibly built. The whole book was going through a journey of how to responsibly build the one that can get you as close as possible to an indicated approach to diet, for example. And the foundational one is I always say the Darwinian principles of evolution, whether or not they are absolute fact-based. It is technically a theory, but I will be completely honest. It's not just a theory. It's highly substantiated by a lot of other things. So because I know that evolution can get contentious, but what I'm saying is it's the best material inference we have that we can base our inferences upon. And so what are we most designed to eat as a species with minimal variation, because we are the most ubiquitous species on the planet and therefore have had more variation in diet than other animals. I will give people that. However, if you look at our physiology and make a composite inference, it's sort of obvious that we should still be at the very least 95% carnivorous if you don't want to be 100%. But again, there's a nuance there. You realize, oh, well, in terms of what our genes have been most evolved to withstand genotypically, well, it seems to be the red muscle meat of ruminant animals. And you could make an argument that it's some small amounts of fibrous tubers, but then I would counter that and say, well, where are you going to find those? Because we've hybridized all of them.
Wait for the broccoli crop to grow before you start. Let's survive and wait.
Yeah. And how much of that were we really consuming? Because and it was, inferentially speaking, only during times of food scarcity. So we clearly didn't desire it either.
Yeah.
And we didn't eat enough of it for it to be required in any sense for our physiology. So that's something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you look at the agrarian revolution, where everybody says, "Oh yeah, we've been eating grains forever," and it's like, well, Was it a fallback food? Why are we trying to convince ourselves that it was the necessary, essential diet factor anyway?
That's another thing. I have talked about this before. I said at the time, principles of indication, whether something's indicated or appropriate to be consuming or not, is contextual. For example, in 99.99% of circumstances, anesthesia is not indicated for me to have administered into my body. But if I'm undergoing a surgery, then it does become indicated, right? So it depends on the circumstances. At that time, well, if you're going to starve, well, of course you want to cultivate plants and eat them until you can actually get ideal food supply. The problem is that over generations, we believed that we became accustomed to it and believed that it was part of our appropriate diet, like we should be consuming it. And there's even some nuance there. I mean, people still prioritized the meat. It was up until about, from what I've seen, I mean, even during the 1700s, we were still prioritizing mainly meat. That was like what we were eating. And then it started to become like the late 1800s, maybe, especially during the early 1900s because of the seed oil thing. And then when human nutrition science really took off in the 1950s and 60s. Now it's just all like plants are great and you should be eating them because so it's like that now we've actually gone from plants are okay to be eating to now plants are good for you to now plants are better for you than meat.
Yeah.
People don't understand how new that philosophy is. It's extremely new. And it's ridiculous. I mean, anyway, so that's I was going somewhere with that, but that's a good way to stop that tangent too, because I mean it's still a good one. Yeah, I mean
no, but they're very logical tangents, and it's if people would just listen to what's being said, it's just think about things instead of just being indoctrinated and programmed by the this is or what is, and that's kind of I think what Mark did too is we all kind of fell onto the carnivore diet whatever way we got there was it, and then when you start to feel it, it's kind of hard to argue. You know?
Yeah, I always say to people like, listen, forget about your science. I am the science. That's it. Like I've gone through the mental health issues. I've gone through. I was obese. I was underweight. Like I had so many problems wrong with me, and I was like, listen, I've been to doctors. I've been to nutritionists. I've been to these experts. Not one of you could solve the solution. But here's a medication for you. And I was actually forced to take medication. Not one of these people were talking, okay, they were never spoke about carbohydrates. They were always saying, like, listen, you need to eat more fiber, you need to eat more plants. This is what we should all be doing. You should be, and I was actually told as well, we need to limit our protein. I was like, okay, well, hang on a second. I don't actually agree with this because I studied, like you, Tony, I studied nutrition 20 years ago. And I was like, well, hang on a second. I've done nutrition. I know the importance of amino acids and fatty acids and stuff like that. So what you're saying doesn't make any sense. So I'm actually going to go away and I'm actually going to look at this myself. And that's what I did. The same as Eddie. I studied this for a good few years. And I was like, okay, well, hang on a second. Are you guys wrong or am I wrong? So that's when I said, well, okay, I need to look at this myself. I need to research this myself. I'm going to do all the research on myself. And then I'm actually, when my life has actually changed, then I'm going to share it to the world. And that's pretty much how I started it all off.
Yeah, I another shame is that a lot of other countries, because you're in Ireland, right? Yeah, it may not be as prevalent in the UK and other European countries, but the problem, it's a problem in India, for example. They put too much trust in the American guidelines, like American-based everything. If scientists in America found this, well, then it's the highest grade, it's the highest quality of scientific information, no matter what you give to me. Well, America says so. That's another issue. Like, I mean, I know that seems sort of like not many people talk about it, but I've actually seen that because there was a conference that a doctor from India, an emergency medical doctor that I talked to, Dr. Ankur Verma, which you may have heard of him before, if you know of him. He did a conference in front of a panel of, I don't know if it was physicians or cardiologists, but he was talking about the insignificance really of cholesterol intake and cholesterol levels in heart disease. And he gave this elaborate presentation about it, and their response was, well, the American guidelines say this, so we're not listening. And it's like, are you just saying that because you don't have a response yet? Or are you actually still going to go ahead and like take a few days to listen to what he said? Is this just what you're saying in the meantime? Or are you actually evading what he said? Like you're not going to contend with anything because America said so. I mean, it's just like, hey guys, people in America aren't always right. There's plenty of we have our own problems in America. We're not perfect.
But you look at what happened in COVID. COVID, I think it started off in China, if I'm correct.
Yes.
It started off in China, then America got hold of it, and then once America got hold of it, the whole world were told, okay, listen, shut everything, shut your borders, everything. So once America told you what to do, it was like we all had to do it.
Yeah. Like,
go ahead, Eddie. Sorry.
No. I was just gonna say we already know how nonsensical that is. It took years for people to really, the majority of people to accept it. Yeah. We already knew it originally, but no, that was bad.
Well, I have some, like, ironically enough, I have some Indian clients, and trying to tell them that ghee is healthy. I'm like, what did you eat before? Like, what did your great grandparents eat? Yeah, ghee. Now, what are you making it with? In India, they're making it with margarine and seed oils, and it's adulterated butter, and it's the American way. And now I think, don't quote me on this, but I think India is pretty, if not the most diabetic country.
That's what I was going to say. Like, you look at, everybody thinks that the Indians have the healthiest diet in the world. But they're probably the only country, or they're probably the country that has the biggest rate of diabetics.
Yep. Yeah.
And I don't think they change much. They love their diet. Just a couple of influences.
Yeah, they're primarily vegetarians, and the main reason seems to be their religion. And when they are told by Ankur, for example, he deals with so many emergency patients. He'll ask them their diet, and it's almost invariably plant-based. How often do you eat meat? Oh, like once or twice a month or something. It's like, oh boy, that's not good. Yet you're diabetic and overweight, and he deals with a lot. He focuses a lot for a reason on this. It's because he sees it all the time. B12 deficiency in the vegetarians as well, and so I mean, he deals with a lot of heart attack patients, a lot of them, and those people happen to be plant-based. And I understand that it's one demographic of people, in one hospital, for example. But then you take a look, and it's like, it's hard to extrapolate it to the entire population with statistical means. However, if you look at that inference, that sample, if you're going to think of that as a sample, and you look at the entire country and you realize that it's the most diabetic country, it's the most dense with diabetics, you realize, okay, well, I mean, something's going wrong. Like that clearly, again, no causal claims, but we obviously know that it doesn't seem to be doing them any favors, that diet. So, it's just India. People don't understand. People don't realize it. People do not realize the problem in India with this. And I'm trying to bring awareness. I'm trying to let Ankur bring awareness. I brought him on my channel a few times for that reason. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Eddie, how are you doing for time?
Oh, I'm pretty good. I've got plenty of time. Yeah.
Cool. Well, are you good, Mark, for time?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Awesome. Because I want to know what you eat, Eddie. What do you eat?
Yeah. So since my channel has been going, I've basically been treating it like a business. So as my business has been growing, I have more money to spend on higher quality products, or at least I'm projected to be very soon. Let me go into what I've been eating for the last 2 years, basically, because, like I said, things are projected to change. I'm not eating the most ideal carnivore way that I'd like, but that's where we start somewhere, right? So, we have a Sam's Club around here. It's basically where we go for all of our groceries to buy in bulk. And the great thing about being carnivore, since I only eat really one food, it's great buying in bulk. I don't have to worry about not eating everything. So originally what I was doing was, like I said, whenever I started the carnivore approach, since I didn't have a job and was living with my grandmother, she was actually buying me all my food. So she was able to buy the highest quality everything. Like I said, I was eating pastured eggs, pastured ground beef, pastured steak, all that stuff, and butter. But whenever I got back home and started staying longer times at home, I was with my dad instead. And he didn't have the amount of money to spend on all of those products for 2 people, of that quality. So I started going towards the grain-fed eggs and the grain-fed beef. And I was almost, given how much health problems I had, I was like, "Oh god, no. I don't wanna do this. It's gonna make me feel horrible." But it didn't. It actually didn't. I didn't like the taste as much. The irony actually was really interesting is you can actually tell that the eggs are weaker quality. They're not as robust, like, they're not as, like, spongy and all that stuff. They kind of fall apart even if you cook them fully. But I was like, "You know what? They're eggs. Like, I'm gonna eat them. It's not plants. It's not a bunch of carbohydrates." So I was eating all that. And I was like, "You know what? Still feel pretty good." So, for months, I was doing that. But then I started to experiment. I don't know why. I think I was taking my metabolic health for granted. I think we all have one of those situations at one point where we're like, "Yeah, I can get away with this now." And it wasn't carbs, but it was me introducing, like, some cheese in. And I was like, "Oh, let me see how that feels." And it didn't actually make me feel great. I was like, "Oh, okay." But so I did the logical thing, and I just kept eating it. So because a cheese can be, like, addicting. But then I was, like, having, like, some pepperoni and some salami, which also here's something interesting. Um, I could eat an entire pack of pepperoni. Even after having filled myself on red meat, I could eat pepperoni and salami. It didn't trigger satiety the same way. And I took that as a warning. I was like, "Oh boy, no, that's not something I wanna be doing. Because if I'm full on red meat and I have the same appetite, the same affinity for the salami and pepperoni that I can have for, like, sweet stuff after I'm full, because it's how our brain works. It's like, "Oh, I look at the steak, I can't eat it anymore." But then you look at, like, a piece of pie or something, you're like, "I can have that though.
Yeah.
Yeah, great." Well, I realized I was doing the same thing with, like, pepperoni and stuff, and I was like, "Hmm, that's interesting." I don't know if maybe it's only me that has the problem, but I couldn't I was like, that was a warning sign for me. I was like, I don't wanna do that. I don't wanna eat when I'm not actually hungry." So I only had some of that. I'm able to moderate that stuff pretty well. So it was a little more variety. But then, like I said, during that Christmas, I started having some other things, and it was only for that month, and then I stopped. I went back to just what I just said I was doing. But now that I have we have our own place here. I live with my girlfriend here. We both live in a little village around here. We are buying food on our own, and I was like, you know what? Now that we're buying our own food, I don't want that pepperoni. I don't want the salami. I don't even want the cheese. Like, I don't want to be doing that to myself. I just want to get red meat. And so I had just started my channel up, so I wasn't making any money. I was like, really, I was like, I better buy the cheapest cuts of meat from Sam's. And I did. It was bottom round steaks at Sam's. It was the cheapest cut they had. And I was like, well, it'll do because it's red meat. And I was eating plenty of those a day. I was eating, at the time, it was about 3 or 4 because I was really skinny and had no muscle on my body. I really didn't have to eat that much at all. And now I'm eating about 5 a day. I have that with pastured butter, grass-fed butter, Kerrygold.
Lucky, both of you.
Do you not have Kerrygold?
We don't get Kerrygold in Canada. I don't know. We have some kind of dairy cartel that can. It's weird, really
That
weird.
is weird. I didn't know you're in Canada. Okay,
Yeah.
that makes sense. Yeah. No, so I get Kerrygold. I basically saute them in a pan. They're not the most ideal steak that I'd like to have, and the only reason for that is not because of any inherent problem with it. It's just because it doesn't taste as good as other steaks. Like, it's really just about the taste. But we do with what we can. We do what we can with what we have. And yeah, so it's Kerrygold butter. It's bottom round steaks mainly. I will buy some 85/15 grass-fed ground beef from the store. However, as I was just saying, my ideal diet, we have a local farmer, relatively local. It's about 30 minutes away, maybe 45 minutes away in terms of a drive there. And he has, like, it's all pasture raised, it's grass-fed, grass finished, everything. The problem is it's about 1.5 times the price. Now, I like the idea of supporting local farmers, because if we could support them more, it would increase the supply, which would lower down the prices eventually. It won't be as expensive anymore, right? But since we're in our situation, it was like, oh man, I'd be spending like hundreds and hundreds of dollars on groceries a month. So eventually I will get to that point. I'm hoping for actually next month or the month after that, having far higher quality beef. It will still probably be ground beef, because of the fact that if I were to get steaks from him, then it would be like 3 times the price. So that's more expensive. But I would like to at least buy one from him. I just like the idea of supporting them, like because as much as you could think of it as me losing money, but if you equate, money isn't the only source of value. I'm not. Is it a net loss of value, really? Is it really? I mean, I don't know. So I could probably do with a little less money for better quality beef, and also supporting him in the first place. So I like the idea of doing that. I'll be doing that. But at the moment, yes, it's bottom round steaks cooked in butter. And once in a while, I'll have pastured eggs. I have this weird appetite thing where I can have like 2 eggs, and then I look at the rest of the bowl and I'm like, I don't want the rest. It doesn't sit right with me. So I have some, but it's not all the time.
And how often do you ever go off that, or is that pretty much no matter what, I stick to my diet?
I really wish I never ever deviated ever. The problem, so we keep the stuff in. My girlfriend's less strict. She has like basically 0 carbohydrates. However, she's more ketovore. Like she'll have like lettuce with her stuff and all this other stuff. But she has if one day she decides to have a small amount of carbs from something, she'll buy a package of something, but she'll only get through like a bit of it. And so I always tell her, yeah, put the rest in a lockbox so I don't get that, because it will be in the house. And I have, it's like almost a mix between an addictive personality and a moderate personality. Because I'm addictive in the sense that if it's around me, I can't do 0. Like I'll have some, but it won't go above like 30 grams of carbs or something, because then I'll be like, I cannot. My body won't even let me grab another. A lot of people aren't like that. They go on 100-gram binges or multi-100-gram binges. I'm not like that. I'll go for like a certain amount, and then I'll go, no, I cannot. Like I cannot do this. No. Time out. No, we're done. But I'm like, I don't want to go for even 2 if I don't have to. Like just to put it in the lockbox. Like go. So I actually have one. We have one. I'm like, I take it seriously. Like if I cannot control myself, you buy your food and then put it in that lockbox, and I'm not touching it. Like, I'm not doing it.
Know thyself, right? Know thyself. That's good.
Yeah. So there's that. I will say though that even with that, I will visit my mom every Sunday, and her cabinets are like the standard American cabinet. And so what I do, same thing. I am able to moderate within a certain grade. I never go above 50. That's not a thing that I do. In fact, that's pretty high for me, given my body type. I think it's probably about above 30. I never go above. But I'll have like 2 palmfuls of chocolate chips. Chocolate is like my weakness. That is the weakness. Is the one weakness that I have is chocolate. So of course, if they're there, I have them, and then every single time I leave the house, I'm like, damn it, every time, man. But I feel like I try and be as logical as possible. I try and do like astral projection here, like look at myself if I were someone else and go, if I'm having 20 grams every week of carbs, am I really doing that much of a problem to myself? It doesn't mean to accept and say 20 grams is fine.
Yeah.
Because then the goalpost shifts every time. If you're saying 20 grams is okay, fine, totally fine, then I'll be eating 40 grams and then be like, okay, no, I can't go above that. Then if you say 40 grams, fine, then 60. And then so I'm not saying to say 20 grams is appropriate, but it is to say on a rational basis, how much are people really eating every day? I mean, hundreds of grams a day, not to mention I'm not eating seed oils. My diet is still it's nutritionally replete. All that stuff. I try and remind myself of that. There's always that part of me though, and in the back of my head screaming at me, like going, yeah, but it's still not okay, man. So I think in a way that's almost healthy. It's like I can keep myself accountable still.
Yeah.
Like
exactly.
So
I mean, I think that, yeah, the difference between going completely off the rails, binging for days, and, you know, like, it is what it is. And, you know, quite often people, you know, and I like what you and, you know, even Bart K say, that when you do your videos, you're not talking about what you do. You're just talking about the subject at hand. And I really like how you handle that, because it's funny, because people, when, you know, you read some comments when they comment, and they're like, they accuse and they point, and it's like, we're not talking about that. We're talking about this, you know? And, and how do you get, what inspires you to do the videos? How do you find them? Do you have a certain formula? Do people send them to you?
So originally, first I was just finding them on my own because I didn't have a fan base yet, or a viewership, really, is what I should say. But now that it's grown, I have more people sending me videos, which in a way is good. Obviously, I encourage people to send me videos because obviously there's people that want, a lot of times what they're doing is they're sending them to me so that I can validate their positions on something, because the video made them insecure about their position on diet. And I'm not saying that in a patronizing way. Everyone faces that. It's like, you have a position in your ideology, and whenever it's threatened by something, of course it makes you insecure. Like, if I've been wrong this entire time, in fact, that's actually healthy to have that self-reflection. So I think that's a big reason for it. So of course it's a good thing that it's being sent. It's just, almost in a way, it sucks that I can't get to all of them. That's really what it is. Like, I get sent so many, and I'm like, oh man, I'll add it to the list. And I have a list. I actually put them in the list, and I go, react to this, hyperlink. And fortunately, I am trying to get to 7 videos a week. I am trying to upload every single day. We'll see how that works out. But yeah, most people send them to me. Now, why do I like doing it? What gives me the inspiration? Well, okay, there's a few ways I can go about this. First of all, what I actually enjoy doing the videos, because in a similar way as to how boxers and UFC fighters like fighting, they like the challenge. They like they like putting themselves to the test. And basically, it's a way of me doing that, but intellectually. It's intellectually stimulating. It keeps me on my toes. I like purveying the truth, and I like being exposed to nuance as well. Having something thrown at you, and then having to be like, okay, let's answer that. Let's figure out something to like say. I treat it almost as a game. The other reason, though, of course, is like, why do I do that in this format, and in a health format, promoting carnivore and all that stuff? As trite as it is, it's probably trite because it's true, and people recognize the situation. We're in a really bad spot in the health space. Not enough people are really. I don't think enough people are in the carnivore space yet, as much as it is growing. There's not enough people to contend with the overwhelming amount of propaganda that is being espoused by people that don't even realize it's propaganda. A lot of times they were taught the propaganda, so they believe it to be true. So they're saying all this stuff, and I'm like, oh God, that's horrible. But then sometimes, and this is no offense to people in the space, sometimes I recognized, I was like, well, these are a lot of carnivores would bring valid arguments, but a lot of times I realized, I was like, and again, this is the blessing and the curse thing. I was like, I'm really, really objective. And I was also on the other side of the coin, like the other side of the spectrum. So I look at that argument, and I'd be like, yes, but also you can say the same thing about this diet that you're saying about the carnivore diet. And I'd notice certain logical fallacies and all that stuff. And it's not me putting anyone down, but I was like, I could bring something else to the table where I could be like I could almost like basically debate with the person on the screen, like in a logically consistent way, to make it more convincing to other people, while also getting into the science, like the physiology behind it. That was another thing. Again, it goes right back to what I was saying about the purpose of my channel. Of course, it is to promote a carnivorous way of eating, and not even just an appropriate way of eating, but an appropriate way of living. So grounding, I talk about as well, sunlight exposure, all that.
Yeah.
But it's also it's getting people to think about the foundation of which all of these positions are based on, and realizing that it's faulty. And that's another reason I do these videos. Like, people, it goes way deeper than carnivore. It goes into really a philosophical conversation. Like, it really does every time. It's like, I realize I've been saying it in my videos. I've been like, yeah, people, this leads into a philosophical argument about this, and I'm like, oh wow, everything's like philosophically based. Like the whole idea that science can really prove what it says it proves, or people say, the scientists say it can prove. And I want to raise awareness to that. I want people to be able to. I want to put power in people's hands.
Yes.
Get people to be able to critically think. If I put that power into your hands and you, with those methods and tools, arrive at a slightly different conclusion than mine, so be it. Good in a way, like you had the tools to think it through. You didn't just arrive at your conclusion because you were told that conclusion is true.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I'm the same. I'm the same as you, Eddie. I do this. I get sent on I must get sent on at least 15 videos a week, at least. And they're usually from clients, and I do the same as you. I have to give people a different side of the story. So if I hear someone talking like about cholesterol or calories or whatever it is, I'll say, right, okay, well, we've been listening to this now for the last 50 years. So now I'm going to talk about it. You can make up your own mind, and then we'll see what happens. And then usually I get new people coming on and saying, well, I never heard of that before. What you're talking about actually makes a lot more sense. And that's what I want. I don't want to come across forceful. I don't want to tell people what to do. I just want you to hear a second side of the story, because we've been listening to the same story for donkey's years now.
Yep, exactly.
And they keep falling back to the same thing. You know, it's all the same thing. And how's that done? What's that done for you? And you know, the doctor said
nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. And I've had this with dietitians and nutritionists. I've had them come on and talk to me about these things, and they're absolutely convinced they're right. And then when you talk about the evidence, okay, like myself or other people, it's like, well, what about the study? I only came off a podcast there at the weekend, a well-known influencer. She's got a huge following, like nearly 500,000 followers. And we spoke for nearly 2.5 hours. And all the way through the conversation, she kept on saying, what about the evidence? What about the research? What about this? And I was like, it felt like I was saying the exact same thing over and over and over and over again. And I was like, when are you going to start listening to me? I've been listening. You keep on saying the same thing, but you're obviously not listening to what I'm saying, because I'm giving you the same answer, but just in a different format.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's another way of approaching. Like whenever you're trying to promote a carnivorous way of eating or something like that, there's two ways to approach it with someone else. If you're trying to convince them, or if you're like debating with them on a personal level or something like that, there's the offensive arguments, so for carnivore, and then there's the defensive arguments. So things like, no, your science doesn't say this. This is the flaws with your science. This is the flaws with the science. This is the flaws with the science. It doesn't show that. So really, the defensive arguments are supporting the idea that carnivore isn't dangerous, isn't going to cause this. And then there's the positive arguments. There's the ones in favor that are like, no, you should be doing it because it does this, it does that. And really, it sounded like, Mark, with that conversation, you were on the defense. It's hard to be a carnivore and not be on the defensive, because all of the currently constructed ideological edifices are all based on the human nutrition science that need to be tackled. The whole foundation needs to be tackled. And so when she keeps saying something like, oh, the evidence, it's like, well, let's discuss that. Let's flip it around. Like, let's discuss the evidence that you're talking about, and let's evaluate it. And that would be a form of a defensive argument. It's like, okay, you're going to want to say this about carnivore. Well, let's look at the evidence that you just put forth. And then once we tackle it, now we're on the slate again. Try again.
Exactly. 100%. Because that's what I kept on saying. I said, okay, show me your evidence. I can show you over 200 people that I've worked with over the last 4 years. These are my evidence. These can come in. I could bring in 10 people that I've worked with in the last 4 years, and these will come in like type 2 diabetics, like people that are going through endometriosis, mental health, you name it. It's like, there's your evidence right there. So are you going to call these people liars, or do we keep going off your research?
Yep. Yeah.
That's it. Simple.
Yeah. People fail to understand how much of the conclusions that we arrive at in the world are still as a result of trial and error. People think of trial and error as sort of some antiquated form. Now that we have science, we can actually empirically prove something. But everything is still trial and error. I mean, think of pharmaceutical drugs, for example. There's no long-term studies done on the side effects or the
you can't study all time. You can't study forever. You can't.
You can't do that.
You only need to look at the latest trend now, Ozempic. How long has it been out now? A couple of years? What's been the research on it? Nothing.
Yeah, I mean nothing at all.
Nothing at all. It's like, okay, this random drug is going to change your life. It's going to help you. It's going to help you with your.
And then they say, "Don't worry, it works. Don't worry, it works."
Just works. That's it. There's no research on it. There's no evidence. We haven't tested it on people. We just know it's going to work. Don't worry about the dosage. I only had a lady on there last night with me on my podcast, and she went to the doctor, and the doctor told her, like, listen, she has PCOS, and she's like, your doctor said, listen, you need to lose the weight. You're too big. You need to lose the weight. So she went in, and the doctor advised her, okay, listen, I'm gonna have to put you on Ozempic. Didn't say how much you're gonna take. Okay, never mentioned anything. She went to her pharmacy. She walked into the pharmacist, and the lady behind the counter said, have you ever took Ozempic before? And she was like, no, this is my first time. My doctor's actually prescribing this. And she was like, the dosage that you're taking can actually kill you. No word of a lie. This is no word of a lie. This is actually, you'll hear this on the podcast. The one behind it said, like, if you take this amount, you will die. Right? She said she should be only on about 25 milligrams or something like that. Right? The doctor had her on over 100 milligrams, guys. 100 milligrams. Now, when she went back to the doctor and she explained the situation, the doctor didn't listen to her. He just said, listen, you need to take this. Forget about your diet.
Wow.
Just lose the weight.
That really pisses me off.
Oh,
dude, yeah, that's messed up.
That's
unbelievable.
That's horrifying.
And this woman was like, okay, I want to control this situation myself. Is this not my choice? Can I not just make my own choice? I should be allowed to make my own choice. Like food, lifestyle, all of this. I shouldn't be pushed down this route of you guys pushing medication on me. And that's what she felt. That's what I felt like for years, because she didn't know any difference. She didn't know anything about nutrition. She actually had to do what all three of us did. We had to study this ourselves. We had to figure out all this ourselves. And it's crazy. It's crazy that nobody's out there there's nobody out there that's given the right support. It's just like you have to do this. This is what it is. The research, the science tells you that you need to do this.
You know what's? I'd love to get your take on this too, Eddie. Is Mark? You know the scary part about all that is, if she said her situation to somebody else, they would say trust the doctor.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You know.
Yeah, exactly. Because people they don't even understand what a doctor is. A doctor, usually when people say doctor, they're referring to a physician. And a physician is trained in specific things, which is identifying symptoms and then tracing that back to identifying a broader etiology that it could be, diagnosing something, and then prescribing a drug, a palliative for the condition, or referring them to another specialist when it comes to like neurology or whatever it may be. I mean, that's their job. So when it comes to like, oh, listen to your doctor when it comes to like whenever people talk about, well, talk to your doctor or talk to a doctor when it comes to diet, what are you talking about? First, there's two things to say in response to that. First of all, they're not trained in diet. They have like minimal training on diet. And what I said in my prologue of my book, I said that actually might be a good thing, because the information that they would be taught if they did get more is horrible. So either way, though, you shouldn't be listening to them unless they did their own private training in the subject, and even then, they could be wrong on it. And it's up to the integrity of the intellect of the doctor and the discipline that they impose onto the work. But also, they say the same thing they say talk to a doctor when it comes to observing scientific papers or something. They don't know, they're not trained in the interpretation of science. So again, unless they did their own private studying of it, you're not going to get a valid analysis. So that's another thing. Like, people just think doctor means like a guy that knows everything, or a girl that knows everything. Yeah, knows all of it. And it's just not the case. I mean, there's multiple different people. Like, obviously you would go to if they knew everything, they wouldn't be referring you to different doctors, like neurologists, for example, if you had a nerve problem, like or anything like that. They wouldn't be saying, "Oh, you need to talk to a nutritionist or something." If they don't know everything, they know that specific thing. But people will just say, "Trust a doctor," because doctor equals medicine, medicine equals science, science equals truth. It all just goes right back to that, like you know. So yeah, no, I don't like the. You're right, Tony, that they would absolutely be saying, "Oh, just trust your doctor." Trust your doctor.
Oh, you don't be crazy. Trust your doctor. And here's another thing that I say this to people all the time. They put you on a drug, they put you on their whatever prescribed dosage. They give you a pamphlet with the possible side effects. But what about the possible nutrient potential deficiencies or malabsorption or causing disruption? They don't talk about that at all. And on your way, and that's creepy.
Yep, it's horrifying, really, especially when you start talking about drugs like statins. I mean, and especially when you start talking about the way that drugs even can be have gone through the approval process. Yeah. I mean, there's fraud involved in that. Yeah. It's money involved in that. Yeah. And especially with regard to statins. I mean, the first experimental statin, like the first statin that was even attempted to be experimented on, of course they have to do it on rats first. They can't experiment on human beings. But
didn't Japan bail on it?
Yes, they did.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I think it was Bayer, the pharmaceutical company here, that kept the research going.
Yeah,
because they were actually racing to get the first statin.
Yeah.
And then they they realized that Japan bailed on it because they realized that when they were testing on dogs, they were having some like tumors grow or something like that as a result of the statins. And they were like, okay, as much as dogs aren't humans, if it is happening in dogs, we're not going to even attempt to introduce this to humans. So they stopped it, rightfully so. But I think it was Bayer. I think they were racing with Bayer, and they continued it. In fact, not only did they continue the research, they actually said later on that the researchers in Japan were not right to quit the research because they didn't see tumors grow in they said that they didn't see them. They didn't see tumors growing in their I don't know how you can mistake seeing that. They wouldn't have made it up because if anything, they would have lied to keep the research going because it means money.
Yeah.
That didn't happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so,
and that's the other side of the cholesterol whole thing that not really many people know too much about. It's like, just look at the history of the drug itself. Look at how it got created, why it was there. And, like Nina Teicholz has done amazing stuff. And like, we all know our way around the cholesterol bullshit. But the other thing that is coenzyme Q10. It's known that statins deplete coenzyme Q10.
Yes.
Now you're on a plant-based diet, low fat, not eating any red meat, low. Where does that go? I don't think they tell you to supplement it. I don't think I've never heard of anybody.
Yes, I've heard very few people actually say to supplement CoQ10. And by the way, it's not the people prescribing the statins. It's the other people that know what statins do that are saying, if you're on a statin, get CoQ10. Yeah. So.
And that's the funny thing about all that stuff. It's like the vitamin K2 thing. It's like all these necessary nutrients are the things that they tell us not to eat. And that right there, like just from a complete wide angle lens, like, okay, so this can save my life, but yet don't eat it. It doesn't make sense.
Yep. Yeah, no, the statins are a perfect example of the fraud and corruption when it comes to the approval of drugs in the first place. The FDA has actually taken off the market a third of the drugs they've ever in their entire lifetime approved of as well. Precisely because of the same issue we started talking about at the beginning, which is science. You keep saying like, oh yeah, it's efficacious. It works.
Yeah.
And then you implement it and it's like, oh, it has these side effects because you can't. Oh boy. Yeah, no, it's a mess. And frankly, the entire go even further. You want to talk about don't even talk about, you said don't even talk about cholesterol. Look at the history of the drug. Look at the history of big pharma.
Yeah, exactly.
200 years.
Yeah, let's go back to Nazi Germany and all these chemical companies creating our seeds and drugs.
Yes, actually.
Awesome. Yeah, nothing like it's a side project from Zyklon B or whatever it was, and then 3M, Bayer, they're all tied to it all, and it's crazy. And I mean,
Rockefeller, Like Rockefeller is the big guy who's the founder behind all that. Persecuting, like he was actually prosecuting, or at least contributing towards the prosecution through Abraham Flexner, through the Flexner Report, of doctors implementing Eastern medicine still, saying, well, this is what we've always done. This is what are you talking about? But if they were ever promoting that in their universities, they were arrested for it. Because it was looked at, I mean, there was a whole smear campaign about that.
Totally.
And now you've got issues like the entire philosophy behind Western medicine, as much as Western medicine has utility in certain areas, of course.
Yeah.
The entire philosophy behind it is anti-human, actually.
Yes,
it says,
I agree. Absolutely agree.
It says implicitly that human beings are inherently flawed.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you have inflammation? Your body's not supposed to be doing that. Let's shut down the inflammation. Oh, you have insulin resistance? Oh, well, your body shouldn't be doing that. Let's force glucose into your cells. Here's metformin.
Yeah.
The entire philosophy is flawed. Not to mention that there is now there's an incentive in the structure of the system to not make drugs that actually cure the condition, even if it's in a wrong anti-human way. That it doesn't even cure it. It's supposed to be a profitable drug.
Yeah.
We just, I don't know. I just did a video on this. It just released a few days ago. Like, I think it was on Tuesday, publicly. And it was on new cancer treatment. So they're shifting away from chemo, and they're going towards something that I would argue, yes, is potentially safer, absolutely. But they completely fail to understand that it can be achieved with diet and lifestyle.
Yes.
They're taking people's fat from their fat cells, genetically mutating the fat into brown fat, putting the fat back into them. And I'm going, you can change your white fat too.
Yes. Take a cold shower and eat right, you know?
Exactly. Exactly. Like, oh my God. Like, even if I'm going to be as forgiving as possible here, like you're right there. And then you're not even
now we're going to start doing fat transfusions now. Like, that's great. All right.
Yeah.
That type for you. Let's put your, oh my God.
Yeah. I even said in the video, I was like, oh man, if I'm going to be as forgiving as possible here, like, at least that's better than chemo if that becomes mainstream, because fat cells, you don't really have an immune reaction if you transplant fat cells. That's why it's used in a bunch of facial, a bunch of, cosmetic surgeries. It responds well and all that stuff. It grows well afterwards. The problem is, like, that's still going to cost a ton of money if you're a cancer patient, when you could be doing it for free. And not in a way that, I mean, scientists can make mistakes. You're mutating fat cells, like, I mean,
and you know where this goes. This goes to creating artificial fat cells in a lab and then injecting them. You don't worry about it. We got you.
Yeah, it's great. Like, oh man, it's no, not great at all. Not great. Like, again, it's the whole Western medicine system. Like, if you actually wanted an ethical medical system, it would be primarily Eastern based.
Yes.
And with minimal Western based, like taking the good from Western medicine and removing
traumas
all
and the emergencies, and for sure.
And I know this gets a little political, but I think that if you privatize the industry, there would be competition for the people that would actually you'd have the quality ones versus the ones that are bad. They would fail. I mean, it's like it's how the free market works.
Yeah.
So because every single country, they have different medical systems, but every single one of them is different. But they all, like, the American healthcare system sucks.
Don't talk about the Canadian healthcare system right now.
It's funny. It's funny because I mainly talk to people from the UK. It's really interesting. Most people that I get a hold of from the UK, or really that get a hold of me, and they talk about the wait times are the bad part there.
Yeah.
Here, it's the cost, not the wait time. It's like so much money. I actually had a family member that had to get a heart transplant. That's a big deal. That was a long time ago. And the first check was $1 million. The first bill was $1 million.
Whoa.
That's
I know a person over here that needs to get a hip operation, and they were told it wouldn't happen until 4 years.
Yeah, it's about 3 years here on a waiting list.
4 years. Like, this guy is in his 70s.
My mom.
Insane.
My mom was she actually did a really good job because, you know, it was kind of gearing with the cholesterol. She had high LDL, great HDL, low triglycerides, she's kicking ass. But the doctor's like, oh my God, you need to go on a statin. I was like, Mom, ask for a CAC score, ask for a CAC test. Luckily, my mom's GP knew what it was, and okay, I'll put you on the list. Year and a half later to get it done. Like, and then the cardiologist was like, why are you here? You don't need this. And she's like, well, doctor issued it. I'm going to take it. After she had the test, you need to go on a statin right now. You're going to die. This is crazy. And it was like, I wanted to rip this. Oh, it really made me mad. And yeah, it was unreal. That was my mom's medical journey with the system. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Fortunately, I haven't had any. Well, I've had an issue. I've gone to public hospitals a few times because a lot of people think in other countries they believe that the American healthcare system is privatized. It's not that it is privatized. It's heavily government funded. It's that you have private insurance. Mm-hmm. That's the difference. You have private insurance. You can choose your insurance, but for the most part, it's mostly government funded. And that's why whenever we're still in, like, I still refer to my clinic that I go to for treatment, a private clinic.
Yeah.
Like because most, like we still call the hospitals here public hospitals because mm-hmm. the system itself, those actual institutions, it's mainly public. Like it's heavily government funded. But I've been to those hospitals and I was told, like, I remember I was up for 40 hours straight because my condition, I never actually explicitly stated the reason why I was having the emotional pain in my stomach. My ribs were so loose that every time that I would feel an emotion, when you feel an emotion, you feel that feeling in your stomach, that's your diaphragm. Every time my diaphragm would move, my ribs would move with it. And it was impinging on all the surrounding nerves, everything around there. And all of your fight or flight nerves are in your solar plexus. Like that's, yeah. And so it would hurt immensely. And I remember it got so bad that every time I would go to sleep, I'd be on the verge of like actually falling asleep. Your breathing slows down and it gets deeper. My diaphragm would spasm, and it kept me up for 40 hours straight. I was exhausted, and we went to the hospital, and I was telling them, like, I told the nurses that day when they were wheeling me in, I was like, I genuinely think I'm going to die today. I genuinely expect me to die. That's what I said to them. I said, oh, no, buddy, I really don't think that's going to happen. And I said, okay. And they looked at me with a straight face when I told them what was going on, what I thought was going on. I already had realized, I was like, I think this is a structural problem. This is really an issue. I was basically waiting out the Florida trip. I was trying to go. I had to schedule the appointment out for months. Mm-hmm. So that's why it took a while. I already knew the problem, at that time I was still speculating, but I had to wait. This happened during that wait period. I was in there and I told them what I thought was going on. And the emergency doctor, the midnight emergency doctor, the nighttime one, night shift, he came in and said, okay, listen, I want you to look at me. Okay. He got on the ground and he said, what your local chiropractor here told you, because I was visiting a local chiropractor who was, by the way, pulling my stomach out from my chest cavity every single time I was there because my bones were not keeping my organs even in place. Bad.
Yeah.
He said to me, what your chiropractor told you about your structural problems causing all these issues and stuff is a bunch of voodoo science nonsense. It's ridiculous. You're dehydrated. That's what he said to me. I'm dehydrated. So then what they did is they shot me up with Ativan, which is a benzodiazepine.
Yeah, just a nice break.
Yeah. And it did exactly what it's supposed to do, where I stopped thinking I stopped freaking out about almost dying. I was like, oh, I might die. I don't care anymore. Yeah, that's great. Okay.
Look at the pretty butterfly.
Yeah. And then they discharged me and they were like, that should put you to sleep since you haven't been sleeping for 40 hours. I went home and I went to sleep and it took me 20 minutes to still get to sleep, even with Ativan in my system, because my stomach was, I was taking deep breaths. Like my breathing was slowed down and I go gasp for air because my diaphragm was spasming. I don't even know how I got to sleep. I don't know how that happened. But even with Ativan, full dose, like intravenously introduced, I still barely got to sleep after 40 hours of not sleeping.
Oh, God.
So That is my experience with the mainstream medical system here. It's not that much better. It's a trade-off. Okay, we don't have long wait times, but the quality is still horrible. And also, not only is it horrible, you have extremely high prices to pay. I mean, that one visit was thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And that's the, I think, if I'm not mistaken, in the States too, you got insurance prices, then you got your public prices. Like if you got insurance, the price changes. I don't know if they inflate one or the other, but I've heard it's a different.
I'm not. Yeah, I think you're about right. I think that's what it is. I'm not extremely fluent in that yet, because I haven't had to since I'm quite young. I haven't had to deal with the insurance issues for at all, really. So I think it's important to know. So I will. Eventually, I'll experience it anyway. I think, unless I do exactly what I'm trying to do, which is avoid the mainstream medical system always, no matter what, leave there. But
I'm pretty much with you, buddy. I'm with you for sure.
Just hoping I don't break a leg or something, So yeah, but
that's cool. So I have to ask a question because Peter will probably kill me if I don't ask a question. I know that you have a video out with critiquing Dave Asprey's opinion on coffee, who is stating that you could hydrate with coffee and it's all good. Because Peter and I've recently stopped drinking coffee. It was one of my last things that I was like, let's give it a good try. It's been over a month now, and I definitely feel a difference. But Peter has been on and off coffee, but we'd love to ask you your take on it.
Oh, well, I mean, coffee, I think that if you're going to rank coffee in terms of how offensive it is compared to all these other things that you could be eating and drinking, I think that it's lower on the list, but it also depends on the caffeine content, because caffeine is by its physiological effects a vasoconstrictor. So it's one of the ways that it keeps you alert, sure, but it's also another reason why it can affect blood pressure so adversely. I treat caffeine and all these other plant compounds as drugs, which means that in certain situations they can have some indications, in others they don't. I know that here's an interesting little thing, a little detail. My girlfriend likes she goes to a lot of musicals. She's in a lot of musicals, or at least she has been in the past. And one of the things she used to get rid of stage fright was to take a shot of alcohol. And she'd go out there and she's like, "Oh, that's the only time I'll do that." And it's because it's like, oh, well, I guess you could use it to your advantage in certain situations. So if you want to do that with caffeine, sure. But the problem with caffeine is that it is absolutely addictive. So you can get dependent on it. And granted, that does mean that the adverse effects can be reduced somewhat because your body adapts to some degree. But you wouldn't extrapolate that logic to something that inflames you. You wouldn't say, well, if you eat this inflammatory food over time, you get used to the inflammation it induces. So therefore, that's good. You adapt to it. I mean, I say that you wouldn't use that argument, except so many people online use that argument. I think they really do. But even putting caffeine aside, actually, there's a lot of this is one of the things that's touted as being positive for coffee. There's a lot of polyphenols in it. Now, and the idea is that polyphenols are some sort of anti-aging compound. And most of the studies I see referenced for those claims are epidemiological in nature, which means that they studied people and they reported that they were consuming a certain amount of foods. Then they said those foods have polyphenols in them, and that must be why they lived longer, according to relative statistics that say 20% longer they lived. And it's like, whoa, that's a reach. Polyphenols, let's go through a different line of logic. Polyphenols are produced by the plant in order to protect them from sunlight. So they are designed to protect the plant. Granted, they're not produced to discourage predation, so it could be safer than things like lectins and oxalic acid and other oxalates. But what it does mean is that there's this idea that I tend to agree with, that there's disparate operating systems between animals and plants. Things that the plant produces for itself, they're not exactly congruous with animal physiology. And this goes for things like their cholesterol content. Plants don't have cholesterol. They have phytosterols. And so they can be integrated into your tissues and they cause issues. Well, I think I would opine that that's probably the case with polyphenols. They're not essential. There's no evidence that they're beneficial. And so I would say take your bets with that one. If you'd like to have them, fine. But there's plenty of other things. I think, isn't there acrylamide in coffee too?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem to be great. I don't
sound great, right?
Yeah. I don't cast aspersions at people that drink coffee. I get it. Everyone has look. It looks like my vice is chocolate chips every Sunday. So I mean, and there's plenty of problems there. But in terms of like drawing a line, like is it okay? Is it not? I don't really think that it's something that I don't personally like the idea of someone being dependent on a drug for energy sustenance, so to speak.
Yeah.
Those things can have utility in certain contexts. I struggle to find a utility for caffeine unless you're unless you're extremely tired. You got like 2 hours of sleep and you have a really, really tough job to do the next morning. Okay, well, you can use it. But don't treat it like you have to have your coffee for energy. Like, don't equate coffee with energy. If you're doing that, it's probably a good idea to cut it out. If you equate coffee with a drug I use once a year, if I get 2 hours of sleep and I have to perform brain surgery, like, okay, or do something else that's a little less extreme. But it's just to get the point across. That's my opinion on it.
Yeah, and I mean, I would urge everybody to watch your video with Dave Asprey, because Dave Asprey's pretty big name in the biohacking world. And
yeah, that's actually another thing. Caffeine is a natural diuretic too. So you'd have to counteract it with electrolytes, which is what I'm glad that you said that again, because that was what I said in the video today. I was like, well, I think I made the mistake of saying coffee is a natural diuretic. Caffeine is a natural diuretic.
Yeah.
So different story there. But I mean, instead of Dave employed the same logic of like glucose goddess, where glucose goddess will say, well, carbohydrates do all this stuff to you, all this bad stuff. So instead of not eating them, we're going to reinforce the carbohydrates with fiber to blunt the spike. Well, Dave seemed to be doing the same thing when he said, "Well, coffee actually can dehydrate you, but that's why I reinforced mine with mineral." And it's like, well, you could also just not depend on the coffee. His philosophy, the entire reason he doesn't say that though, is because he believes that coffee is anti-aging. He's like, all the longest living people, they drink a cup of coffee a day.
Yeah.
Well, what else do they do, man? And what else do they not do? That's really weak.
And I can't help but say he has multiple coffee. I know he's got his danger coffee, but he's also got multiple like ventures in it. So where is this?
Even if he comes around to our way of thinking and says, you know what, they actually might be right. Well, it's too late now because you've made a brand, and so now it's like,
now we're gonna put minerals in it.
It's
just and I mean, it sounds an awful lot like what they do with flour, with enriching it. Like
fortified flour and niacin.
Yeah.
Folate. And you're like, what? I mean, so you have to fortify it because it doesn't have any nutritional value. Okay. Great. So that's weird already. But at least it's only the minority of the product. Oh, wait. No, it isn't. Pop-Tarts.
Yeah.
Waffles. Or like anything. Like, so it's the majority of the product. It's the primary. It's the foundation of the product. It's not even an ingredient you fortified. It's the first ingredient you fortified. The thing it's made of. If that doesn't tell you, you shouldn't be eating that in the first place. It's primarily grain-based, our societies. So, yikes.
That seems to be the way we go about it. Don't worry, we'll just stick it in there. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure we could, Eddie. I'm sure we could talk for hours, but I want to take up all of your day. We do really appreciate.
We can do this again at some point if you'd like. We can talk about it.
I mean, I know for a fact, like, Peter's going to be devastated, and he was really looking forward to meeting you. And
yeah. So we should do another one with him. I'm not familiar with who Peter is.
Yeah, and he's the Dutch carnivore, and he's type 1 diabetic, and he's got a great.
That actually sounds familiar. I think I may have seen it on social media then.
And and he wanted to talk to you about stuff because I think some of your reaction videos to one of your I think you guys don't like him the same. I mean, I'm good. I don't want to bash anybody today, but Jacob Foods. Peter always is about this guy, Jacob Foods, and I know you just did a video with him. Like, he's a dietitian that just
Oh, wait. So Peter's a fan of Jacob Foods? Is that what you're saying?
No, he's like he gets mad. He texts us all the time about this guy sends another video. He does another video.
Yeah. I just did. Yeah. Jacob Foods, man. That's I invited him on to debate, and because he kept posting me on his story.
Yeah.
And he did it the second time. He did it again, and I said, "You ready to talk face to face?" That's what I said.
Yeah.
On the channel, and he never opened the message. I know he saw it. I know he saw that message.
Yeah.
He just didn't respond. So
Yeah.
whatever, man. I actually think what you're saying is that we dislike him, but in different ways.
Yeah, well, yeah, but I mean, it's pretty.
We'll definitely have to get you on, Eddie, and do a live Q&A on this.
Yeah.
We'll have to like get Peter on, and we'll debunk this influencer, this dietitian, and we'll do another 2 hours on this, because I know that's what Peter really wants, because he's always speaking about him every week.
Man, yeah, Jacob Foods. Just
we should definitely do something on him for at least 2 hours, because
and you know, like, we're not here to dog anybody, but we do appreciate all your reaction videos, man, because it's nice to have that logic background, that wall of logic that, you know, it's because sometimes, I mean, Mark and I, we get angry, and yet no logic comes out. We just get emotional, and it's tough sometimes.
Yeah, I will say that on my channel, the person you see on the channel is a lot of a character, because I'm in a room alone watching a video that is not me looking at them face to face, receiving it. Like, it is a character, yes, because as soon as I'm done recording, I'm going, la-di-di, whatever. Did my part. Whatever. But yeah, we should definitely do it. Just any of you guys can get a hold of me. Do you have my information? I mean, I could probably give you guys my email.
If you want to send your WhatsApp to Instagram, send me your WhatsApp, then I'll be in contact with you probably tomorrow, and we'll set up something in the next couple of days or whenever you're free.
Yeah. I'll have to look at my schedule, but next week I'm pretty open. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Well,
perfect.
Yeah, we'd love to come, because we do live every Sunday. We go live and we discuss all things and some nonsense and some stuff that most people are scared to talk about. And we'd love to have you come on and just, you know, hang out and get critical. It'd be beautiful.
Yeah, sounds good.
Well, Eddie, thank you so much for coming on and talking with us. And if you don't know who this guy is, you should. And if you soon will, because he's I think one of my top 5 carnivore heavyweights. I'm not gonna lie. I think you're taking over, buddy. I love it, and the work you do with, you know, calling people out I think it's necessary. And where can people get a hold of you? Your YouTube channel, and obviously your book. I will post the links of all your stuff, obviously, in the description. So we'll read his book, Contraindicated. But I'll hand it over to you, Eddie. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on. So basically, I'm mostly on YouTube. You can find me by typing in Edward A. Goeke or Edward Goeke. Goeke is spelled Goeke. And yeah, I'm primarily on there. I'm not really on any other social media. However, you can get a hold of me on through Instagram, which is at e.goeke_. Yeah, I respond to DMs on there, and then my email, edgoeke@pm.me, using Proton Mail nowadays. And then in terms of where to purchase my book, I tried to make it as available as possible. So it's now available in paperback, hardcover, self-narrated audiobook, because I am all about authenticity, and also ebook. I finally got the ebook out. So it's on Amazon. Find it. It's on Rakuten Kobo. So anyone that reads Kobo, there's Barnes and Noble. It's even on Barnes and Noble. And then we're trying to. It's pending through Google Play Books. So anyone that uses Google Play, audiobook is on Kindle or Amazon, Google Play, and Kobo. Barnes and Noble doesn't have an audiobook version, so it doesn't have an audiobook option. But all those are. The ebook is available on all 4 platforms. The paperback and hardcover is available through Amazon only, and the audiobook is available through everything except Barnes and Noble. So that's where you can get it. I mean, I tried to make it as available as possible. So, yep.
Awesome. Well, we will love to have you back on, and we'll see you soon. Thank you so much, my man. Mark, any words?
No, Eddie, it's been a pleasure. I've learned an awful lot. I've been a fan of yours now, like Tony, for the last couple of years. Yeah, and it was absolutely a pleasure having you on finally.
Yeah, no, like I said, thanks for having me on. I'm looking forward to the next one.
Awesome. All right, boys. We'll see everybody soon.
Yep.